I think the talent team that starts to have that mind shift, I think are going to win in the future, and they're going to win big in the future. The talent market is shifting, as you can see under our feet.
But still, we're in 2025, and I know because of the conversations that I have daily that a lot of companies are still resistant to this. Not everyone has managers like you or like me who believe in brand building as a recruiter.
And I see very often now where the recruiter, they become their own brand in some ways. The worst thing you can do is be a recruiter that nobody remembers or knows. Everybody's afraid to say things online, but I think then people craft a narrative that doesn't feel genuine at all. You start doing it and you look back and you've just been doing it for so long, you forget what was the purpose. Maybe that individual crafted the interview flow.
Most recruiters think they're filling roles. Dave Vu thinks they should be building brands. While the industry obsesses over whether AI will replace recruiters or not, Dave's making the case that recruiting is actually marketing in disguise. And the companies that figure this out first are going to attract the best talent. From his days as a recruiter to co-founding Ribbon, he's proving that when you treat hiring like brand building, everything changes. Dave, welcome to Workfluencer.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
So I'm excited to have you here. But for folks who aren't familiar with you, can you give us the 30-second elevator pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. My background has been in talent for about 15 plus years in a variety of different capacity, at agency, in-house, early stage startup. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I realized I wanted to be on the other side, being a builder and building solutions to help out these problems that I saw constantly within my 15 years.
Amazing. Some of the best products are built from someone who was on the other side. So I'm excited to talk to you today. And you've said, I've seen it all over your content, that recruiters should really think like brand marketers. But most of the recruiters that I know and that I've worked with can barely get candidates to even respond to their emails. How are they supposed to become marketers on top of everything else?
I mean, it's not an easy task, right? Because that's where the differentiation occurs. There's too many people that are doing the same things, and it becomes very tiresome for candidates. And it's really hard for candidates when they're looking at an opportunity. They're looking at it and saying, "Wow, this seems so similar to something else. It doesn't really entice me." And there's so much opportunity that's out there now that it's really important to build a very unique, genuine brand. And I think the talent team that starts to have that mind shift, I think are going to win in the future, and they're going to win big in the future. I think in this day and age, it's too competitive to do the same things over and over. And the talent market is shifting, as you can see under our feet. People are not staying at companies as long as they used to be. It's much more competitive. There's just a lot more opportunities available, and people are applying very easily to these roles now that you need to differentiate yourselves.
Was there a time when you were working in talent? Was there a moment where you were like, you know what, we're doing this all wrong?
Yeah, there was a couple times, and I can point out the first time that happened was probably in my older startup at Ezra. This is where I met my co-founder, by the way, at Ribbon. We were really trying to hire really top candidates around the world very, very fast. This is around 2018. So social media was starting to become more prominent within the talent space. And I just realized that the messaging that I was putting out there wasn't resonating with the people that I really wanted. And so I started to become, myself a little bit more, be a little bit more genuine and creating messaging that, it wasn't have to be very polished. It just had to be very genuine, direct, coming from me. And I noticed that those candidates related to me, and we started building a better relationship. So that's when it really started to hit home for me. And then ever since that point, especially at Ribbon, that's really where we try to make that happen more and more with our candidates that we're attracting.
Yeah, it's definitely, I remember those times, the 2018, 2019 times where we saw things start to shift. Yeah. But a lot of recruiters have seen the shift, and they still think that posting, we're hiring with a stock photo, and they're doing marketing, right?
Yeah.
You spoke about being yourself and stuff like that, but there's lots of people who aren't that comfortable. How does being a marketer, a recruiter as a marketer? How does that really look like?
I mean, there's a variety or a range of talent marketers, in my opinion. Like, you don't have to be that super vocal, like in your face. Like, you can just be yourself ultimately, right? And that's what I was looking for when I was hiring great recruiters on my team, or at least the recruiters I started to train. I can see the best ones that were bringing great candidates and resonating with them. Was the main thing was just storytelling. So whatever you can tell a story and tell it really well, concise, have your own voice, you start building those relationships, because whatever you're saying, you're going to resonate with a certain type of candidates that we're going after. And I think that's really where I got a lot of my recruiters to get out of their shell and to be themselves, and to create more, candid materials and social media posts and videos and things like that, and capture real moments within the process, but also within our culture.
If you've made it this far into the episode and you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. How do you define culture?
Yeah, so for me, culture, I hate the term culture fit, right? Because I think culture fit it forces everybody to be the same. But ultimately, if you're building a company, you have a North Star. We know what type of individuals we're looking for. However, anybody that's coming in should be in the culture add. And those individuals are going to add something slightly different that's going to improve the culture that you currently have and make it even that much better. And I think for me, culture add is probably the most important thing. It's really hard to define because you have like a set of values that you as a company have. However, there's going to be slight differences within a team, because within a company, you might have the company culture, but you also might have the department culture, the team culture, subculture as well. And so those, to me, is really important, is to be able to bring in your authentic self and like create a genuine culture within the company itself.
And the reason why I ask that is because, as you were saying, and I know you're an advocate of like sharing your culture and like your hiring process publicly, but most companies, they really guard that stuff like if they were state secrets. What happens when companies actually show the true culture and like their true process?
Yeah, I mean, that's challenging because you also want to have a unified message within an individual. So there's a fine balance you need to strike. You have to have a unified message of what the company values. What are we trying to accomplish? What is that North Star? So that's to me the basic. You got to get that down right. The other piece is really pulling back the curtain on the process. Too many times it feels like there's a gap between the interaction with the candidate and the recruiter because it feels a little bit cold. It feels a little bit transactional. It feels a little scary, to be honest with you, right? And people are applying to a job feeling like they're being judged and they don't know what the process looks like. So that creates a little bit of anxiety. In my opinion, I don't think you want that, because when I'm talking to a candidate or an individual, I want them to be as comfortable as possible so I can go and dig a little bit further of who they really are. I don't want them to have the anxiety and put up a guard that's not who they truly are. That makes my job a lot harder. It makes my team's job a lot harder to identify those individuals. So I think pulling back that curtain, showing them what that process looks like in advance so they can anticipate what the stages looks like, make it feel like it's more of a conversational, even though it's still an interview. Make it feel very comfortable for them, being available to them to answer any questions. I think that's going to play in your interest as a company.
And I like how you position it as like, if you're not making it comfortable for them, they're acting like, we already know everyone's on their best behavior during an interview. And I like how you said it. It's something that I've always believed as well, too. If you make people comfortable, they will show you who they are as much as possible, right? They'll still be on kind of their best behavior. And that actually helps you make a decision on whether they have the skills and whether they will fit into the team, because guards are down. Everyone's like on a human type of level. But still, we're in 2025, and I know because of the conversations that I have daily that a lot of companies are still resistant to this. Not everyone has managers like you or like me who like believe in brand building as a recruiter. How can recruiters listening to this bring that to their management and like make the case to allow them to be themselves and like show the actual behind the scenes of what's happening?
I mean, to me, there's two things you can do. The first one is showing what can work. And I think the main thing is really, testing it out. You don't have to roll it out to the whole company. Sometimes people expect, talent acquisition strategy to be like, well, this is one size fits all. We're going to roll it out to the whole organization. That's always challenging because we're going to try different things and some things are not going to work. I always say start small. Start with one particular job, for example. It could be, you might have like 100 jobs and you might say, let's just pick one job with my particular team in this particular department. Let's try something different, see what the results are. Put in a specific timeline and what the results can be, get feedback from the candidates. I think all those things are super important. I mean, that's partly why we built our ribbon, is making sure that it was very comfortable for those individuals to try this really quickly, spin up an AI interview, have those conversations and measure that. And I think that's the best thing you can do. The other thing is there are other brands out there that you can look to, and you can use that as a guide or a beacon of what works, and then show that to your manager. And then from there, you can take some of the best practices and then tweak it for your own.
What are some of the brands that you think are doing this well?
Yeah, I would say, I think Nike's doing a really good job. Like they really try to, they almost don't sell the company. It's weird. They don't sell the company at all. They make it feel like we're going out there to identify the best fit between an individual, and this is the place that you should be in. And they create this great process. I haven't obviously applied in a long time, but from what I've seen and admiring from afar, they seem to have the branding piece really well. And I think there's a couple other ones, like Duolingo does a great job as well. So, and it feels like for me, if I was a candidate, I saw that type of employer branding or recruitment branding, it will attract me definitely to those jobs a lot more.
Yeah. It's definitely, I think the brands that you have mentioned, from what I know, heavy like influence or even participation from their consumer marketing teams in their employer branding and in their recruitment marketing. So it's aligned with what you're saying, that you need to think like a marketer and like build a brand, or like a brand builder when you're recruiting.
I think one thing I did notice, and you make a very good point, is that they blur the line between a customer and a candidate. And I think that's a good thing, because ultimately those candidates that don't get a job in that process will come away with a great experience. They're going to, word of mouth is going to spread. Even if they, the best thing you can do as a talent leader or a talent team is those that get rejected or don't get the job, tell others about the process. I think there's no better branding exercise that you can do. So if you can do that, you can also create potential customers from that process as well. And if you get that right, I think it's the ultimate TA strategy.
Yeah, for sure. So I can already hear a recruiter saying, I don't have time to be creating content. I have recs to fill. Like, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, don't think of it as you're doing it on your own, right? Even for us, we work with our, we have a marketing process, and we work with that process very deeply. So I think larger teams, you could work with the marketing team, and you're able to craft out a message, have those individuals help you craft out that message. I think from a personal branding standpoint, it's up to you as an individual, but that will ultimately help your career. And I see very often now where the recruiter they become their own brand in some ways. And then you look at the company's brand, but they're kind of interchangeable and intertwined. And I think that's a good thing.
And it's interesting because as someone who's very out there, when I was getting recruiting jobs and recruitment leadership jobs, it was always like hit or miss, where people were like, oh yeah, she's got her own brand, come here. And other people or in other companies were like, no, we don't want someone with such a strong brand type of thing. Yeah. But I've never really understood it, because recruiting in general, go back to remove all the internet, remove all of this back to the beginning days. People wanted recruiters who knew people in the industry who could bring them in. So if you were praised in the past for having this strong network of people that you knew, and you went to every career fair, every networking event, everything, why is it the opposite now when we have like it at our fingers, literally? Yeah.
And honestly, it's amplified now, right? With all these channels. And sometimes, I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes I will recognize that recruiter, and I don't know where I've seen this person, but it's probably because they've created so much content. They've been at events. They've been introduced to me by other people, but it sticks with me in my mind. And so the worst thing you can do is be a recruiter that nobody remembers or knows. And so you just become, very transactional, and then you're not really building those relationships. Many times you're going to have a situation where those candidates might not go with you for the job, but they'll remember you and they'll come back later on. And I think that's the ultimate aim of this game.
Yeah. I remember back to times where I've had people say like, hey, Rhona, I'm on the job hunt now. Where are you at now? Because I'm a startup gal. So I worked at many startups. They're like, where are you at now? Like, what's interesting? It's like, wow. So how does AI fit into this like recruiter as a marketer transformation?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's more about allowing going back to what we were saying earlier, is allowing those candidates to feel very comfortable in having conversations. We've had many feedback from candidates that said, this didn't feel scary at all. I was able to ask a lot of questions. It was a two-way conversation. In a weird way, they almost felt not judged as much, even though they know that the AI is going out there and asking questions and bringing out those answers to a recruiter. But the AI was built with, the best AI should be built with empathy, the ability to listen. I always say, if you want to build something, you want to build it mirroring your best employee, or, the archetype of employee that you're looking for. And in this instance with TA, it's really somebody who is actively listening, that has asked great follow-up questions, has done its research of the candidate, is very empathetic. And I think if you have those things combined, you're going to create a great experience for the candidate.
And for listeners who might not be familiar, you're talking about Ribbon, your product, right? And how it does the interviews. Can you just give them like a quick preview of what Ribbon does?
So Ribbon, essentially, you as a hiring manager, recruiter, can craft a custom AI interview in less than 30 seconds. And then you ultimately can pick the different personas for a recruiter. We also have 12 plus different languages. So you can make that a recruiter now speaking Spanish all of a sudden. And then you ultimately, after that process, you've put in place the questions that you want the AI to ask. And then a simple link with AI is attached to that. And so very simply, because it's a link, you can integrate that anywhere that you're attracting candidate. I always say cast a really wide net, because you're going to find great candidates. And as a candidate clicks on the link and then starts screening with the AI, it all comes back to one, the job requisition that you've created. And then from there, you can go through and filter for the different candidates. You have their transcript, you have their video interview, and then you can decide who you want to spend most time to dig a little bit deeper into that particular candidate's experience.
So definitely this frees up time, but like paint me a picture, right? In your ideal world, what are human recruiters doing while AI handles the interviews? Because I know you're not trying to replace recruiters. So like, what's the vision?
Yeah. So we think, and I firmly believe this philosophy, it's human in the loop, right? We think this is one of the biggest decisions you're going to make in your life: buying a house, getting married, finding a job. And so we always want to have a human in the loop to have that conversation. But we know that hiring requires multi-stages, and sometimes it takes a really long time. And so we want to speed up that top of the funnel screening process really fast. it allows the recruiter to free up their time to pick and choose the best candidates that they're going to spend. Instead of 30 minutes, they're going to spend now, they can have more time because they can spend an hour with this candidate, build a relationship, sell that candidate, also free up their time to think more strategically how to go out there and, market themselves, like we just said. Or at the same time, maybe go hunt a little bit more. And so that's the ultimate aim, is to be able to have any recruiter 10x their productivity, but allow them to do the best things that they're good at, which is building relationships with those candidates.
So yeah, definitely frees up time for the brand building piece that we're talking about. So every HR person I know is terrified of saying the wrong thing online. How do we get past that?
Yeah, I think it's a wider cultural issue. Everybody's afraid to say things online, but I think then people craft a narrative that doesn't feel genuine at all. And goes back to what we're saying, is you're trying to build genuine connections and relationships. And I think for me is don't overthink it. I was in that shoe not that long ago. Like, a few years ago, I would craft out my LinkedIn post and then I would read every single line, every single word. And I realized when I posted it, people didn't really people digest that, but it wasn't like you had to scrutinize every single word, right? It was more about the general content and the themes that you were putting out there and a string of messages. And I think the best thing you could do is just get out of your head, not overthink it, be yourself, obviously be respectful in whatever message that you're putting out there, but create that very genuine tone of who you are. And I think that will serve you really well.
Quick break. If you've been thinking about starting a podcast but don't know where to begin, I've got something for you. I'm letting women in TA, HR, or employer brand take over the Workfluencer Podcast for one episode.
I am so excited to be able to do a podcast takeover. And I'm joining Rhona Pierce today as a guest host. Rhona is the creator of the Workfluencer Podcast.
You get a behind-the-scenes look at how I plan and produce everything. I handle all the editing, and you walk away with a fully edited episode, social clips, and the audio to launch your own pod if you want. If that sounds like your kind of test drive, head over to workfluencerpodcast.com to apply. So let's talk a little about your actual story and how you're building Ribbon. Are you using your own brand marketing playbook to build Ribbon, or are you doing something different?
Yeah, I'm starting to post a lot more on LinkedIn, and I think it's starting to resonate with people. It's just things I've been thinking about for a long time, and you have to sit down and craft out what you want to. You have to consciously think about what you want to write, but once you start creating that stream of consciousness, it gets easier, because then you're not. It's more about your own, it's yourself blocking yourself from posting. And so I started posting a little bit more. I have certain ideas and themes that I've seen, whether it's relevant in the market that I love to talk about, or something that I've seen in the process of building as a founder. And so I try to think of different perspective that people will be interested in. And so for me, my perspective comes from a talent leader with a certain amount of years of experience that now is a tech co-founder. I think that's kind of unique. And so sometimes I will wear my founder hat and I'll speak from that perspective. Sometimes I'll speak from the recruiter, talent acquisition perspective, and then everything in between. But I try to put myself in those different shoes when I write my content.
How has it been received by people? Because I know, okay, AI that's seemingly that's doing interviews, right? So as a recruiter, you can look at it and be like, oh, whoa. So how has it been received by your audience?
I would say the honest truth is that it's polarizing because I think it's really new and it is scary. And people have this assumption about AI. The joke always is it's like Skynet, right? Terminator. I think people go to the extremes when it comes to AI. And so it is polarizing. People have a lot of questions. A lot of it's just misconception of what it is. And I think that's where you can have a conversation. But you can see sometimes that when I do a post, there is people that are very opposed to AI. That also tells me that we're onto something, just because I know with the technology adoption curve, that means we're early enough, and there is something that we need to dig a little bit further into. But there are always going to be people that are not going to always agree, and that's okay. Right? That's where you learn the most, and that's where I always have dialogues with the individual. I'll give you a quick anecdote. There was a post that I did about AI and how it would replace some of the recruiters' responsibility, and there was a lot of recruiters that were up in arms, and they were making a lot of comments. And I think I had about 1 million+ impression on this post.
Wow.
And I actually answered every single comment, and I booked time with a few people that had really insightful comments. I had a conversation. I realized that we were thinking of the same thing, but different perspective. And I was able to learn a lot. He was able to learn a lot from me. Subsequently, he posted something weeks later saying, I was surprised that Dave would even jump on a call with me, spend some time, but I learned a lot. And this is what, changed my mind on a bunch of things. And I think that's really the discourse of a dialogue. I think it's really important that we're missing sometimes today in our society.
That's such a great story. First of all, replying to all the comments on a post with so many impressions, I can imagine took some time. But it also shows kind of like where we're at as an industry, because yes, lots of companies have weaponized, I think, in my opinion, AI and their playbook, especially HR tech companies, their playbook is to go out and be like, we're replacing blah, blah. And it's like, why would you talk to your target audience about you're replacing them? Like I don't know how that's a good sales playbook in anyone. But
And also the truth is, if you go back to when LinkedIn started, I think about this story all the time. When LinkedIn first started, the message was, oh my God, LinkedIn's going to take over every recruiter's job. We're going to have less recruiters than ever before. It actually went the opposite way and exploded more recruiters, because all that meant was you allow more people to be able to create networks and then go and recruit. And hiring didn't stop. It just increased. And now you have a tool that you can use at your disposal. People thought that with LinkedIn, you don't need recruiters. And it was like, you can just go out and find those individuals yourself. But no, you still have to go through the legwork. You still have to manage it. It is still an interview process. And I think this is no different, in my opinion.
Do you think that candidates are taking to or like adopting or accepting AI in the hiring process faster than recruiters are?
I would say yes. And I'll point to a couple of interesting data points. I would say people below the age of 35 are adopting at a rate much, much higher and faster. And I did notice, from our initial data is like people 40, 45 and above, I think are resistant. But I think that's really normal with any new technology, especially in technology like AI, where people are not as comfortable or not as familiar. And those same individuals might be the ones that are more accustomed to doing things a certain way as well, which is okay, right? And you're never going to get 100% adoption on any new technology. But the people that have gone through the experience, and we ask this of every candidate that goes through our ribbon experience, we give them a very quick feedback page. And now in the tens of thousands of candidates that has interviewed, the average score is typically 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5, and they write a little comment. And the common theme or comment that we hear is, wow, this allows me to have a voice and speak more than just being screened with a resume. Sometimes, that is just powerful enough so that an individual feels like you're not throwing your resume into a black box and being screened and filtered by keywords. Somebody is looking on the other side and showing your true personality. The other piece they love is the accessibility component. I hear a few of these stories that I think really resonates with me is a single mom. They work a shift. They come home, they put the kids down. They want to look for that new job. They can't schedule a call with a recruiter at 11 p.m. And we see data now that a lot of our candidates are doing phone calls post 7 p.m., sometimes post 11 p.m. on the weekends. And so this gives you accessibility like you've never seen before.
Yeah. I think we're getting closer, and I love that there are more and more tools and like tools like Ribbon that are really helping us get to where we need to go. So like if recruiters start thinking like marketers, what dies? Like what sacred cow in recruiting goes away forever?
Yeah, I would say we would love to see the initial resume filtering die in some way or form or fashion. And I don't mean that like in a very like in a facetious negative way. It's just more, I just don't think that's the best way to identify a candidate these days. A candidate on their side is using a lot of AI tools to like improve their resumes. And so the resume ends up looking all the same. And so if you really want to know who that person really is, I still think the first best step is going to be a phone screen of some way or form or fashion. If we can make every recruiter do a phone screen because they have unlimited time, that would be ideal. But of course, in this day and age, you can't because people are applying en masse. People are applying 5 to 7 times more than ever before. And so I think that's an area where if resumes disappear, but you can still get a lot of the information you're looking for in a conversation with AI, I think that would be ideal.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think you posted about that recently, about how everyone's resume is going to look the same. Like, it's true. Like, people are using tools. They're going into ChatGPT and just saying, hey, I'm applying for this role. What should I write on the resume? Well, everyone's going to look great on paper. How do you figure out who's actually great?
Well, and a lot of times people will take the job description, throw into an AI tool like ChatGPT and say, craft me the resume that will allow me to get through the keyword filters or whatever your case may be. And then it just becomes a game then because you end up going to get found out or caught in a screening call when you start digging a little bit further. The beauty of a screening call is that you get to dig a little bit further. You can't really anticipate what the next question is going to be like. And so you end up going, okay, well, if you said this, I want to know more. Like I'm going to probe a little bit more about the example you provided.
My favorite question as a podcast host and as a recruiter has always been, tell me more.
That's great. That works all the time.
It's just like at that point, people just have to like literally tell you more. Yeah. So someone's listening to this in their car, probably in the parking lot before walking into their recruiting job. What's one thing they can do today that would actually move the needle?
Yeah, the one thing I would say is from a marketing, brand building standpoint, I would say probably pulling the curtain back and explaining what your process is going to be like, but in a much more genuine way, is a really simple way of solving that. Of course, I can go on about other things you can do, but I think that's a really simple thing you can do. And explaining what that looks like, making it feel less cold, explaining why those process exists. Sometimes I don't know if you've ever been in an interview where there's 7 different interviews and then you realize, what's the purpose of this interview? I'm not even really sure. Like, how does that fit in? It ends up being very redundant. And by doing that, what it tells me is that you're going to have to look at yourself and your recruiting process and step back and go, does every stage here make sense? What are we doing? What is the message we want to get out? And then it allows you to refine that process because you have to explain yourself why to the rest of those candidates.
Yes, I love that. And I would even take it a step further. Yes, share your process. Second post or second piece of content, what questions are you asking? Yeah. Because a lot of people, and I know this is a controversial one, giving questions ahead of time and stuff like that. Some people say yes, some people say no, but share the themes. But that will force you as a recruiter and as the hiring team in general to ask yourselves, why are we even asking this question? Because when you have to explain to someone, you're going to be talking about this, then you're like, wait, why are we even asking that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. There's many times, especially in large organizations, you start going down the interview process and you go, who built this? Like, well, what are we doing? You start doing it and like you look back and you've just been doing for so long and you forget what was the purpose. Maybe that individual crafted the interview flow 5 years ago, left the company, and now it's like the company's changed so much. It's okay. Like you're able to like change that up. The other thing I would add, actually, if you were going to ask me a second thing that would work really well is be able to show truly what your team dynamic looks like and culture. It goes back to what we're saying. I think that's harder because, people want to craft the narrative a certain way, but if you can somehow do that and do that very genuinely, I think you're just going to attract really good people.
Yeah. What do you think about this? What I usually tell people is to show your culture, start with the things that you reward. What do you reward at this company? Who just got promoted? Why did they get promoted? Tell that story. That gives candidates an idea of like, oh, people who do X, Y, even if it means people who work 20 hours a day get promoted here. Do I want to work 20 hours a day? No. But there's other people who might. So like that type of thing, you're showing your culture, you're celebrating your employees, and you're just telling a story.
I love that. I totally agree with you on that, which is the worst thing you could do is set a wrong expectation. You're going to say, well, we're like this and we're like a family. I hate those quotes, right? You're like this. And then you come in and the expectation changes. Well, you didn't do any favors to anybody. That person's going to be resenting the fact that they came in and were, create a false narrative or a false expectation. That's not what you want. You just want to match up to who you are. And it's okay if people filter themselves out of the process. I think that's a really good thing. Like if they can self-filter that because if they ask more questions and they don't want to join, that saves you and your team a ton of time, right? And you don't have to convince that individual to join you. But I think a point that you made that I think is really important is instead of just saying, show what that can look like. I think that's probably more important. Too many times companies just say it without giving you an example of what that looks like.
Yeah. And we're having those conversations every day anyway, because great candidates are asking you more than just what's the culture like. They ask you specific questions about the things that matter to them. Tell those stories online. That's content right there.
Yeah, and I think those individuals are savvy, and those are the types of candidates that you want on your team because they're questioning things. They're asking great questions. They care. That's why they're asking questions. The ones that don't do their research and are just asking you very surface level questions, you can kind of tell like this is probably one of 20 jobs that they just applied to. And so I think those are really good questions, and it gives you a good indication of the type of individual that might be joining your company.
All right. So I've enjoyed this conversation, but before we wrap, there's a segment that I like to do towards the end. Okay. It's called Plead the Fifth. So this is how it works. I'll ask you 3 questions and you won't know what questions are being asked. You can only plead the fifth once, or you can answer all of the questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. What's your hottest take about AI in recruiting that would piss people off?
Ooh, the thing that would probably piss people off is a lot of bad recruiters are going to lose their job. I don't know if that's a hot take, but I just think the industry is going to shrink. And I think that's a really good thing. It's going to filter out people that don't really care about this space. And it's going to elevate those that really care. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people that lose their jobs, but I think it's the right people that are going to lose their jobs, in my opinion.
I like that. If you could delete one thing from LinkedIn forever, what would it be?
I don't know if I want to plead the fifth is more. I just don't remember. I've posted so much that I don't even know if I can go back long enough. I would probably say, actually, you know what? There's nothing that I would delete, to be honest with you. I think it's all part of that journey. I remember my first post and I thought about it. I was like, it's very cringe. Like I just didn't like it at all. And I'm being very self-aware of like what I posted. And it sounded like, in my opinion, cheesy. And then I realized, that's just one post for one day. And then next post is the next time and nobody remembers or cares. So I don't think there's anything I would delete, to be honest with you.
Amazing. All right. Last one. What's the dumbest recruiting trend that everyone's still doing?
That's a good one. I'm going to plead the fifth. Not because I don't want to answer it, just because I don't know what the answer is. And so I'm using that one card for me to plead the fifth.
Amazing. Amazing. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. How can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they could come to my LinkedIn and find me on LinkedIn. And then if they want to, they can always connect with me on email. I try to answer a lot of people. It's harder and harder these days, but dave@ribbon.ai. And go check out our website, ribbon.ai.
Amazing. And I'll link all of that in the show notes. Thanks again for joining me on the show.
Absolutely. This was a pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening. If you're enjoying the Workfluencer pod, share it with someone who's changing how we talk about work, or who should be. And hey, if this episode gave you ideas or inspiration, leave us a 5-star review. Reviews help other listeners find us, and honestly, it makes my day. Workfluencer is produced by Perceptible Studios. Learn more about how we can help you use video to attract, engage, and retain qualified talent at perceptiblestudios.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll chat with you next week.